Hi, my name is Janvi. Now, let me ask you to think of an innovation. What would you say? Now, most of you would think of technology companies and their products, or groundbreaking markets like artificial intelligence or machine learning, which are great examples, but let's look at the dictionary, see if you can really think outside the box. The Oxford American Dictionary states the definition of innovation as a new method, idea, project, etc. With that in mind, let's think of innovation as a new idea that helps tackle challenges facing society. Often, solutions to systemic issues are targeted directly and only at the affected group. But the problem with this approach is that it isn't inclusive of the collective impact. Take photography, for example. Let's say you take a picture and realize that the lighting is often one portion of it. What do? Now, you wouldn't just zoom into the affected area and then adjust the exposure there. You'd look at the full frame of the photo and then adjust the settings based on that. So, why is this? Because you're accounting for the collective impact and not just the affected area. And the same thinking goes for existing societal challenges like gender equality, women empowerment, women in technology, etc. Identifying and approaching these challenges should be done through a lens far more inclusive than just of the women directly impacted. Men make up 49% of the population just in the US. So if we want to change, everyone should be part of the development. The He for She movement, which started officially after an impassioned speech from Emma Watson 5 years ago, shows the importance of everyone in the fight for gender equality. The innovative idea here today is about encouraging all genders in order to achieve equality. Women and men need to partake as agents of change and take action against negative stereotypes and behaviors. According to Forbes, it's the duty of every person to support gender equality. It's simply an issue of humanity. So, how do we get started? But first, let's consider why it's critical that more than just women support gender equality. The answer is pretty straightforward, because equality and acceptance leads to success. And here's how. Now, you might think that hard work, perhaps intelligence, maybe even motivation leads to success, but that's not quite it. According to Stanford University, success, believe it or not, comes from equality. And the idea of jointly enabling all genders for the bigger societal success is the innovative thinking behind today's talk. So, how do we get started? But there's a problem. We all believe in equality, but how much are we educating both boys and girls in elementary, middle, and high school, or even as adults, about gender equality and acceptance? As much as we push our girls to work harder, are we educating both genders on the need to empower women and encourage them in the workforce? We are, in some respects, perpetuating the problem by forfeiting the opportunity to educate and instill this thought in all genders. To me, it sure seems like we'd be much more successful as a society if we focused on early education for all students. So, how can we start educating all students on this topic? As a student in the Silicon Valley, I've seen a lot of push for girls to get into STEM, which is great, but in order to bring about real change, we need to instill this thought in boys as well. We need to teach kids that this change in thinking will have a powerful impact. When I first entered middle school, I knew that studying and working hard was the only way I could accomplish things. But now as I'm growing up, I realize that it's important for me to go to the core of the issue. Women not being in STEM or not feeling equally empowered is only one part of the problem, but it's also about acceptance. Once young boys see young girls alongside them, it will show them a new norm from a young age. Have you ever thought about how many programs there are encouraging girls to participate in activities to show that they are equal? But this is a one-sided view. Just telling girls that they are equal isn't enough. And I hope that my idea about educating both genders on this topic resonates widely in our larger society. So, How can we achieve this? A simple start could be through human growth and development, a class that is taught in school so kids can understand the physical and emotional changes that they go through in their bodies. But why do the boys learn about the girls and vice versa? This is because it's basic information that we all need to know. And the same thinking goes for existing societal challenges like gender equality, women empowerment, women in technology, etc. Just as much as we teach our kids about their human bodies and biology, teaching kids about equality is education for the mind, and this needs to start early on if we want to see change in our world. According to Inform Ed, it's the duty of every person to support gender equality. We need to raise children to respect one another as individuals, no matter what gender they are. And a good way to teach this is through a class in school. When kids grow up and become adults, we want them to teach future generations the importance of equality. Global Partnership of Education states that teaching equality to the youngest learners is important for us to see change in our world today. As much as we teach our kids about their human bodies and how they grow and develop as they enter puberty, it's important to teach kids about gender equality as they enter the real world and face these societal challenges. During this human growth and development class, where we talk about these societal challenges, we can talk about the power of language connecting to gender equality. We can teach kids to recognize gender bias when they see or hear it. For example, let's look at the phrase, "be a man." Why do we say this? We are unknowingly saying that men should shape their self-worth around traditional notions of masculinity, and that their original behavior equals weakness. We can hold discussions on how gender bias has wormed its way into our everyday language, and that we should notice and change it. Another thing we can talk about during this, let's call it a societal challenges class, is purpose before popularity. Now, we all have that fear of not being accepted in school, work, or even in society. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't stand up for what's right. We should teach kids that they will not be rewarded with popularity or social acceptance by participating in such behaviors. Gender equality is important for economic development, and we should let kids know that they will see change in our world by being more inclusive. Now, there's no doubt that equality and acceptance improves the well-being of individuals, cultures, communities, and nations worldwide. And finally, we can also highlight implicit biases such as benevolent sexism and gender inequality. Some people may look at a situation and say, "I don't see any gender bias here," but there really is. The key is to understand and recognize these gender biases and manage them. For example, let's say you're in an election and there's a male and female candidate. The media perhaps unknowingly uses gender bias throughout much of the election. One can agree that the type of media coverage for the female candidate will focus more on her clothing designer or her role as a mother, rather than her actual policies and relations. Quality is far more important than for the role she is a contestant for. Another example is, let's say you're a working woman, and you get complimented only on your looks. It may feel nice. I mean, who doesn't like a compliment? This may even make your day when you're feeling blue. It won't seem harmful at all at first, but over time you'll realize that you're only getting superficial comments on your appearance and not on your work. Eventually, this will lead to frustration and discouragement. Now, these are only a few examples, and there are many more. And we should teach kids to recognize this early on. So let's recap on what we've spoken about today. Gender empowerment and equality are not just female fights. It's a collective initiative that we should all be striving to defend. The future not only depends on women's advancement, but also on everyone redefining traditional gender roles. So here are a few key takeaways on women's empowerment that we can instill early on. 1, do not use traditional gender norms. In other words, boys can be sensitive and girls can be dominant too. and we should make the idea of women in the workforce or in school widespread. 2, we could reframe a discussion around women empowerment inclusive of all students. 3, while teaching about their human bodies in class, we can be sure to talk about the differences between boys and girls that may enable or disable women's advancement. 4, we can instill an environment where kids can recognize and speak up against inequality. And finally, this needs to start early on if we want to see change in our world, so we can make it a better place for all of us. Thank you.